we can also mention from the life of the Shaykh and some of the benefits to be taken. They say concerning the Shaykh that he was very nice in terms of his dress. He used to look after his appearance. He used to dress appropriately and nicely, even though he was blind, to the extent that he would make sure that his clothes, and these are what people narrate who used to be with the Shaykh. People who used to be with the Shaykh and they accompanied him a lot, they say these are the things we noticed from him. One of them was that the Shaykh, even though he was blind, he would look after his clothing and wear nice clothing and make sure that it was always above his ankles. They mentioned this, the people who used to accompany the Shaykh. His clothing was always above his ankles. Some of them mentioned typically it would be 4 fingers worth. Others mentioned sometimes he would wear it halfway on his shin. And this is the Shaykh, he's blind, but he would make sure, not that I'm blind, just give me any thawb, but he would make sure that it was in accordance to the Sunnah. And there's a narration mentioned that on one occasion, he was wearing a new item of clothing. Often you see those cloaks that the scholars they wear, or in Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries they wear. They mention that on one occasion the Shaykh, he got a new one. A new one was given to him or bought for him or whatever. And it so happened that this new one, it was longer than the ankles. But the Shaykh was wearing it and he wasn't aware. He was blind, he wasn't aware that this new cloak was actually longer than the ankles. So then one of the people who used to accompany the Shaykh, he said, I said to the Shaykh, have you changed your opinion, Shaykh? Have you changed your opinion? Or do you consider it permissible to wear the clothing below the ankles now? So that's when the Shaykh found out that this new item of clothing was longer than the ankles. So they say that instantly the Shaykh took it off. He took it off. And at that time they were in Mecca. They were in Mecca at the time. The Shaykh used to live in Riyadh. So he says, this person narrating that narration, that the Shaykh instantly took it off when he found out that it was below the ankles. And then in the end, he says, we ended up having to go back to Riyadh and the Shaykh wasn't wearing one of those. Whereas typically you expect the scholars, etc., they'd be wearing those, and that's from the traditions of Saudi. But on that occasion, he says the Shaykh ended up going back without one on top, because he wouldn't wear it, it was below his ankles. This is the way of the scholars, in sticking and clinging to that sunnah. That's what we mean when you hear the narrations. It's not just about hearing them and exiting from the other ear. تَمَسَّكُوا بِهَا وَعَضُّوا عَلَيْهَا بِالنَّوَاجِذِ. Cling onto it and bite onto it with your molar teeth. That's an example of it there. That's an example from the scholars of clinging onto the sunnah, biting onto it with the molar teeth. Many people now, they'll regard that as something futile. So what if it's slightly below your ankles? The so what is answered by the sunnah. The punishment which is mentioned for those people. The opposition to the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ. For those who consider that as a so what, then for them they do as they please and for them is their end reward. But as for those who wish to honor this sunnah and to practice it and truly cling on to it and be from those that Allah keeps firm and steadfast, then be upon steadfastness and clinging onto it as the scholars they were. In this example there, when the Shaykh he found out, instantly got rid of it and he walked without one of those cloaks until they arrived home. This is how the scholars are in precision in implementing the sunnah. From the affairs also mentioned about Shaykh Ibn Baz, rahimahullah ta'ala, was how accurately he would look after his time. How accurately and precisely he would look after his time. And almost everyone who knew the Shaykh, they always mention how the Shaykh used all of his time in aiding and benefiting the people and in worship. All of his time would be used in those affairs. There wouldn't be any time wasted. Some of the people who knew the Shaykh, they even say that they themselves personally are not aware the Shaykh ever took a day off work in his life. Some of the ones who know the Shaykh, they used to say this, that we don't know ourselves from our accompaniment of the Shaykh. We're not aware, we can't remember any day that the Shaykh ever took a day off work. You try telling that to the people now, there'll be shock and amazement. Not a single day for my whole life. The Shaykh, they say, never took a single day. Some people, they say that we are not aware, we don't remember any time the Shaykh taking a day off work. And they mention how he used to get up an hour before Fajr, pray the Tahajjud, go and pray the Fajr prayer, then sit with the people, answer their questions, etc., help them as much as he is able. He used to do all of that. Spend his time working for the people. And that's why some of them used to say why would the Shaykh there take a day of work? Or they would say rather, it's actually impossible for the Shaykh to have taken a day of work. Because his actual work that he used to do, his actual work that he was employed to do as the senior scholars in writing the articles, fatwa, judgments, rulings, all these things, that is what he would have done anyway, whether it was his work or not. Helping the people, answering their questions, fatwa, etc. That's what he would be doing anyway, irrelevant of whether that's your shift in the office or not. So they say it was actually impossible for him to take a day of work in any case, because his work was exactly this, teaching and spreading the religion the whole of his life. Also, what can be mentioned regarding the Shaykh from the benefits we take is the humbleness and the modesty of the Shaykh. The humbleness and the modesty of the Shaykh. There are various narrations. They say, for example, on one occasion, Shaykh Ibn Baz, rahimahullah ta'ala, was in Hajj. And you know, for those who have been to Hajj on the day of Arafah, then you're sitting in Arafah for that day. It's hot, it's crowded, particularly if you don't have a tent under you or over you. And they say that the Shaykh, he was there on the day of Arafah, and it was hot, etc. And that somebody came with one of the people who were with the Shaykh. They came with a bowl of fruit for the Shaykh on the day of Arafah, when they were sitting there. So the Shaykh said, when they came to him with the fruit, he said, the people who are sitting around us, it's crowded, people are there, lots of people. He said, the people who are around us, have they got food and fruit? Are they eating? They said, no, Shaykh, nobody else. This is a plate for you. So he said, take the plate away. I'm not going to eat the food. If there's other people sitting around and they have this thirst, they have the heat, they have the difficulty of this day, then I'm not going to eat if people around me aren't eating anything. Even more than that, there's an incident, they say, when the Shaykh was ill. When the Shaykh was ill and he was in hospital, the doctor said to him, you need to eat specific types of food. Special types of food with certain properties to them, and other types of food you can't have them. So when they came to him with this special food just for him, he said, this particular food you've got me, is this the food that every other patient in the hospital gets? They said to him, no, Shaykh, you need this specific, this is for you, especially we got it for you. He said, in that case, take it back. Give me the normal food every other patient in the hospital gets. This is the way that the Shaykh was. And all of that taken from the inheritance of that knowledge. Did the Prophet ﷺ not say, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ, I have been sent to perfect the manners and the morals, the behaviors. Is it not a hadith? أَثْقَلُ شَيْءٍ فِي الْمِيزَانِ يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ حُسْنُ الْخَلَقِ. The heaviest thing on the weighing scales on the day of judgment is the good manners and the behaviors. So no doubt that's a part of being upon uprightness and steadfastness. To have that good behavior, that humbleness, that modesty. And this is how the Shaykh he was. Even though the Shaykh spent his life in teaching and educating the people, worshipping himself, it's mentioned about the Shaykh that he would have, from his good manners and behaviors, he would humor his students. He would have small jokes that he would make with his students as a means of compassion between him and his students. Because as the Shaykh himself used to say, the Prophet ﷺ occasionally used to joke with the companions. As long as it is only occasionally, it's not something which is made into every gathering and every sitting has to have joking and laughing and the teeth must come out. That's not the way of it, but occasionally if it was done, it's mentioned the Prophet ﷺ used to do that. So Shaykh Ibn Baz similarly used to joke with his students. They say, for example, if he used to go and make wudu, he would take off his ghutra and he would give it to somebody sitting next to him just to go and make the wudu. And he would say jokingly to them, when he gives it to them, don't keep it, it's not a gift or anything, I'm just making wudu. I'm coming back, I want it back in a minute. Jokes like that just to humor those around him. And this is something that's mentioned about the Shaykh, that he would be in that good way. They say also that when the Shaykh used to invite the people to his house for dinner, invite the people to his house for food, etc., those who couldn't attend, sometimes people couldn't attend, the Shaykh would say, you're invited, you're all invited to my house. The ones who aren't afraid of their wives for not getting told off, then come for dinner now. If you're afraid, then go. As a joke, he would say that lightheartedly. And again, he would say to some people, or maybe the sisters might not find this one funny, he used to say to some brothers, why are you not marrying twice or 3 times? Why don't you have 2 wives or 3 wives or 4 wives? And this one particular student said to him, Shaykh, I'm upon tawheed in marriage. I don't marry 2 or 3 or 4, Shaykh. I'm upon tawheed in marriage. So the Shaykh said to him, this is the tawheed of the fearful ones. The ones who says he's upon tawheed in marriage, he's a fearful one on tawheed, on that type of tawheed. So he used to make these types of jokes lightheartedly with his students. And that's mentioned from the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ too. The Shaykh mentioned the Prophet ﷺ would be light-hearted on occasion with his companions, etc. And this is how the Shaykh he was also. That's some of the highlights or some of the things that we can mention from the life of Shaykh Ibn Baz. There's no doubt so much that can be mentioned in terms of the work that he did, in terms of da'wah, the books that he wrote. There are more than 50 books by Shaykh Ibn Baz. Over 50, 60 different books, small books, big books, in aqidah, in fiqh, in various affairs. The Shaykh spent his life on those. And if you read for example, the books on the Majmu' al-Fatawa of the Shaykh now, you see how many different questions and how many different topics and how many different fatwa the Shaykh would give in helping and aiding the people in understanding their religion. But this is the way of the Shaykh. This is how humble he was. This is how he used to behave with the people. They mention about his humbleness also that even the furniture in his house, his own family mentioned this, that the Shaykh, we used to say to him, Shaykh, the furniture in the house, it's all rubbing away, it's tearing away. We need to get new sofas. And the Shaykh would say, no, bring everybody, let's check. And all the family would come, etc. He would say to them all, check, or do they need to be replaced or not? Let's all decide, is it really a necessity or not? From the humbleness of the Shaykh. He doesn't want to just throw them out and buy new ones and waste the money. Similarly, they used to say to him, the Shaykh with his official position, he used to get given a car by the government or the authorities for his official position as the Mufti, etc. So, every so often, they would replace his car with a newer model or whatever it was. They would replace his car every so often. So, on one occasion when that time came to have his car replaced, the people that came to him, his people, they came to him and said, Shaykh, we need to replace the car. Which one would you like? Which other car would you like to have to replace the one we have now? The Shaykh said, why? What's wrong? Is there something wrong with the car? Has something happened to it? We need to replace it. They said, no, Shaykh, this is just the way it is. This car now, it's been here for a year, 2 years, and this is the way now that the authorities, etc., they provide you a new car now. You can get a replacement, a newer model. So the Shaykh said, okay, what about Chevrolet? That American brand, Chevrolet. It's popular in Saudi Arabia. And it's not a brand which is highly regarded. It's not what you would think in this country as your BMW or Mercedes or whatever you say. It's more like the Ford Fiesta or something. So the Shaykh said, what about Chevrolet? They said, Shaykh, no, the Chevrolet, that's not befitting, Shaykh. It's a very low type of model, a very cheap type of car. We need to get something higher up, something more befitting for your status. So the Shaykh replied and he said to them on that instance, he said, why? The grave that we're going to be buried in, my status, your status, the person who's got no money in his pocket, the grave we are all going to be buried in, that soil, is that going to be different for different people? Am I going to be in a soil made out of gold, for example? The soil we're going to be buried in, the grave we're all going to go to is going to be the same. So what difference is it now you're telling me if the Chevrolet isn't good and this other company is better, we need to get that? This is how the Shaykh used to respond. Nowadays the people of authority, without even thinking, you go straight to the most expensive items and the most expensive cars. But this was the modesty and the humbleness of the Shaykh, and this is how he used to behave. We're running out of time, but we'll mention the final point or one more point. Typically speaking, mostly speaking, majoritively, in most lectures that you hear about the life of Shaykh Ibn Baz, that's the aspect of his life that you'll hear about. How much he used to worship Allah, how his humbleness was, how he taught the people, the greatness of his knowledge. Those types of things you'll find in the lectures, even if it's the Ikhwan al-Muslimin or some of the other misguided groups giving the lectures concerning Shaykh Ibn Baz. They will leave it at that point because they want to try to highlight that the Shaykh is not upon the methodology of the Salafis now. They want to try to highlight that the Shaykh, he was nice and he was kind and he was generous, all of which he was. But as we've said, Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, they are not extremists on any side. Not to the extremist on refutations or whatever, neither on the other side of extremism in falling short in the rights of the religion. And Shaykh bin Baz was not on any extreme. As the people, some of them, the misguided ones, the people of desires, even those who claim Salafiyah for themselves, some of them, they will try to picture this image that the Shaykh was in reality on an extremism of softness and gentleness, and that he would never speak about people, he would never refute people. That is not the correct idea to be having regarding the Shaykh. He was Salafi. He was upon the methodology of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And so he was upon that center pathway also. Not on the extremism here, nor on the extremism there. So, we'll quote now some of these statements of the Shaykh with regards to that. Shaykh bin Baz rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, إن النقد من أهل العلم وتجريح من يجب جرحه من باب النصح للأمة. People, they will say, the Shaykh, he wasn't like Shaykh Rabi'. Shaykh Rabi' isn't on the methodology of Shaykh bin Baz. That's what they say. Shaykh Rabi' and Shaykh Ahmed Najmi and Shaykh Ubaid and Shaykh Muhammad bin Hadi, they say these scholars, they're not like Shaykh bin Baz. Look at how Shaykh bin Baz was. Look at how Shaykh Ibn al-Uthaymeen was. These scholars now, they are not upon that methodology. This is what they will claim. The likes of Ali Hassan and all these others, they make those types of statements. And for them, they'll give you a lecture just telling you about the mannerisms and the goodness of the Shaykh. But they will blindly or turn a blind eye to this aspect of the seerah of the Shaykh, which is that he was firm upon the people of innovation, as is the methodology of Ahl Sunnah. He was firm upon them also. And that's why the Shaykh says here now that criticizing or the criticism of the people of knowledge and their refutations upon whom requires to be refuted is from advising the people. That is good. That is advice to the people. Those scholars who refute the ones who require to be refuted, then that is an advice to the people. Again, as we say, inheritors of the prophets. الدين النصيحة قالوا لمن يا رسول الله. And at the end of it, وَلِعَامَّتِهِمْ. Advice and purity and sincerity to the general masses of people in advising them where to take knowledge from and where not to take knowledge from. So the Shaykh said, refuting those individuals is from advice to the ummah. It is advice to the ummah and advising them where to take knowledge from, where not to take knowledge from, etc. وَالتَّحْذِيرُ مِنْ بِدْعَتِهِ أَوْ إِنْحِرَافِهِ أَمْرٌ مُتَعَيَّنٌ كَمَا فَعَلَ عُلَمَاءُ الْإِسْلَامِ سَابِقًا وَلَاحِقًا. And warning from his innovation and his deviance is something that is a necessity, it is required, it is something that is needed, just like the scholars of Islam did previously and currently. Similarly, in another advice that the Shaykh wrote to the students of knowledge, he said that it is upon the student of knowledge that he is harisun jiddan an la yaktuma shay'an mimma alima. That the student of knowledge, and this was an advice from Shaykh bin Baz, he said the students of knowledge, it is upon them to not conceal any knowledge that they have. Harisun ala bayan al-haq, that he is keen upon spreading and clarifying the truth. وَالرَّدْ عَلَى الْخُصُومِ لِدِينِ الْإِسْلَامِ, and refuting the opposers to the religion of Islam. لَا يَتَسَاهَلُ وَهُوَ أَيْضًا لَا يَكْتَمُ مَا عِنْدَهُ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ. The student of knowledge doesn't become slack in that. Doesn't become lenient in that. In warning from those who require to be warned against, in clarifying the truth. And he doesn't conceal any knowledge that he has. بَلْ يَكْتُبْ وَيَخْطُبْ وَيَرُدْ عَلَى أَهْلِ الْبِدَعِ. But rather he writes and he addresses the people and he refutes the people of innovation. This is how the Shaykh was in regards to that. Many of the people, they try to bring their deception on that point. They say the Shaykh never used to refute anyone. Shaykh Al-Uthaymeen never used to refute anyone. This wasn't their methodology. That is a deception from them. Look at the way that Shaykh bin Baz and Shaykh Al-Uthaymeen rahimahumullah were, and their refutations of the people of innovation, and mentioning by name those who need to be refuted. then you will see that this is a deception from these individuals, whereby they will bring you multiple examples of how generous and kind the Shaykh was and say that was his methodology, and purposely turning a blind eye to the remainder, which is all from the methodology of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. We'll conclude by mentioning the statement of a Shaykh Al-Luhaydan, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala. When a Shaykh bin Baz died, then they asked a Shaykh Al-Luhaydan regarding the death of Shaykh bin Baz. So he said, قام بأمور كثيرة قل من العلماء من يقوم ببعضها. He said, Shaykh Al-Luhaydan, concerning Shaykh bin Baz, that Shaykh bin Baz, he did things that rarely scholars end up even doing some of those things. He did so many things for Islam and the da'wah that other scholars barely end up doing a portion of those things. And yet the Shaykh ended up doing so many of these different things for the da'wah and for teaching and for Islam. قضى حياته في تعليم ودعوة وإرشاد. He spent his whole life in teaching and giving da'wah and advising and guiding the people. And the Shaykh said regarding him, he is من نوادر علماء هذا الزمان. He is from the very rare scholars of this era. And we'll conclude upon that with the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, إن الله لا يقبض العلم انتزاعا ينتزعه من صدور الرجال ولكن يقبض العلم بموت العلماء. These scholars, they have this knowledge in their hearts, and that is what the scholars, they say, knowledge truly is العلم ما حوى الصدر. Knowledge in reality is that which is within the chests, not that which is in the books on the shelves. Knowledge is that which is within the chests. So here now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is mentioned, does not take this knowledge away by ripping it from the chests of men, by taking it from the hearts of men that is memorized. Rather, this knowledge is taken by the death of the scholars. And that is why you will see so many of the scholars saying that it was such a great loss when the likes of Shaykh bin Baz and Shaykh Al-Uthaymeen and the scholars of their stature, they passed away because of what they did in defending a Salafiyah and calling to it and preaching it and spreading it. So we'll conclude upon that point as a brief biography of Shaykh bin Baz and some of the events from his life and the understandings we can take from that. And we'll stop at that point. It is the prayer. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.